Floyd and Rayshard Brooks. The protests have had an impact on the men and women in blue that are causing real dangers for officers and the public. We've got the perfect panel to discuss. Former Sheriff David Clark and Tim Bulot, the owner of Strategic Weapons Academy and a sheriff's deputy in Ellis County. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Sheriff Clark, first to start with you. They charged this officer with murder, and not just murder, but he could face the death penalty for routine policing.
This is insane. It's absurd. This is a malicious prosecution on the part of this politically active DA in Fulton County. There, his last name is Howard. It's funny that 2 weeks ago he charged two other law enforcement officers for simply pointing a taser at protesters as they were clearing an area. All they did was point it. He charged them with aggravated assault, and he said under Georgia law, a taser is a dangerous weapon. So now all of a sudden, with this police officer in this Rayshard Brooks case, he's claiming that a taser is not a dangerous weapon, which is why I said this is nothing more than political activism to appease an angry mob.
All right, so to give a little background here, he's accused of $140,000 funneling taxpayer money to his own salary just to pay his bills, and now he's got a re-election that's tough. Sergeant, what I want to ask you here is when you looked at everything going on, now I've trained with you, and I want people at home to know that, and I've trained with police officers, and you've had SWAT teams that have come in, you command a SWAT organization, you're an officer there. When you look at how this all went down, is it not legitimate to think that this officer feared for his life and his only choice was to discharge his firearm?
Oh, absolutely, and there's a lot to look at, Grant. Like you said, just the DWI arrest by itself has got so many mandates behind it. There's such a strict procedure that has to be followed, and it's in and of itself, it's a lengthy process. And then when you couple it with a use of force situation like this, that's a lot for an officer to handle at one time. But those officers have been through taser training. They've been tased themselves. They know how the weapon can incapacitate and make them that much more vulnerable. So they've experienced that aspect of it themselves.
All right, Sheriff Clark, I'm sure you've commanded investigations where you had one of your deputies involved in a police shooting. It typically goes to an outside agency. This DA ignored the Georgia Department of Investigations.
Well, I've been part of a team with the Milwaukee Police Department, the homicide unit that investigated all officer use of deadly force, and then I commanded that unit when I got promoted to lieutenant. So I know how these investigations work. And then what you have to look at, you asked if it was legitimate. That's not the standard. The standard is the reasonable officer standard. I have been tased as part of the taser training. It does incapacitate and puts an officer in a very vulnerable situation. It was not unreasonable for this officer to believe his life was in danger. At that moment, these are split-second decisions. He made that decision, and what we have to do is look at the facts and circumstances surrounding what he did. Not what he might have done, not what he could have done, what he did with the facts and circumstances surrounding this. When it's looked at like that from the reasonable officer standard, which is the legal standard, this officer should not have been charged, and I know that this charge will not stand. This officer will sometime down the road be acquitted of it all. Officer use of deadly force, and then I commanded that unit when I got promoted to lieutenant. So I know how these investigations work. And then what you have to look at, you asked if it was legitimate. That's not the standard. The standard is the reasonable officer standard. I have been tased as part of the taser training. It does incapacitate and puts an officer in a very vulnerable situation. It was not unreasonable for this officer to believe his life was in danger. At that moment, these are split-second decisions. He made that decision, and what we have to do is look at the facts and circumstances surrounding what he did. Not what he might have done, not what he could have done.